There's a fine line between getting fitter, faster, stronger and overtraining and digging yourself a hole. I'm Lindsey Parry from CoachParry.com, and today we're going to talk about identifying which side of that line you are on. The thing to assess while you are training really hard is, how hungry am I? It is very normal for endurance athletes to basically feel hungry all the time. I actually refer to endurance athletes as cows, because if you've ever watched a cow during the day, you'll just see they graze and graze and graze and graze, and it seems like they never stop eating. And that really is how you should feel as an endurance athlete. If you have a suppressed appetite, if you are struggling to get food down, if you are not really feeling like eating, particularly at meal times, this is a really big sign that you are in a chronically fatigued state, or at the very least in the early stages of a over cortisol cycle. In other words, your body has produced too much cortisol because you are under too much stress. And while this is a fantastic hormone when we really need to get through short-term periods of stress, it is not a great hormone when it's pushing us through long-term chronic stress such as overtraining. It suppresses appetite and it prevents you from sleeping, precisely because it was designed to keep you on the move during times of danger without needing to stop to sleep or to eat and to drink. So if you lose your appetite, it's a big sign that you are sliding onto the wrong side of the load cycle, and you should pull back and give yourself a little bit of extra recovery time.
Okay, so we have discussed around the sort of telltale signs of your overtraining versus just being tired regularly. And one of the real aspects that we need to focus on is achy or sort of sore muscles versus injuries. And it is very important to be able to differentiate between the two. Keep in mind, when you're in a peak training load and you are doing quite a lot of work, especially when you start cross training and you've got your strength training happening over and above the running, it is important to note that you can expect to have tired muscles. You can expect to have slightly achy muscles just sort of to the touch. What is important though is we don't want that to be a regular thing constantly. So you don't want to always have tired, or you don't want to always have sore muscles, and you need to be able to differentiate what is fatigue and soreness versus what is an injury. And that injury is generally when it's a constant pain, stabbing pain, when you lying in bed at night and you're in absolute agony, when you wake up in the morning and you're trying to get out of bed. Those are the sort of things that we need to really sort of see as red flags and be able to pick up the difference between a pain and a stabbing pain, which is a potential start of an injury or leading towards an injury, or just the tender muscles when you can feel yourself walking upstairs and your legs are a little bit tired. Those are the kind of things we need to just keep a close eye on. The tenderness in your muscles, again, as I mentioned, is normal, can be expected, but generally with some recovery work, some foam rolling work, doing some potential cross training, so whether it's swimming or cycling, you can generally get rid of that. Whereas if it's a nagging pain and it's something that is ongoing, again, red flag that we could be leading into something a little bit more serious. Now, what do we do if you feel pain? Now, as I mentioned, the kind of what is usual in the muscle soreness, once you've done a warm-up, you'll generally find that you can get into a rhythm and actually that muscle soreness is gone by the time you really start your training session. However, if you are struggling with sort of stabbing pains and you can really feel that, we don't advocate for trying to push through discomfort and pain. So first prize is definitely to try and stop immediately. Try and walk a little bit. If that pain is just not going away, then you need to call that run off and potentially go and have a look and see if it is something that's a little bit more serious and we need to have checked out. As I said, if it's just a little bit of soreness, by the time you've walked a little bit, you will tend to find a little bit of easing and you can actually get going. But by no means should you try and push through any pain. or think it'll be all right, it's nothing serious, because that's when we're at risk of just causing more and more damage as you carry on training.
Another thing that you need to look out for is monitoring your weight. So if you're really struggling to lose weight or really struggling to gain weight, that's a bit of a red flag when it comes to overtraining. Essentially what is going on is that normally you always want to have some sort of symbiosis where you're at. Your energy input should be matching your energy output. If that is not the case, you should easily be able to lose weight, or easily, if you're not doing enough exercise, be gaining weight as well. That's normal homeostasis. However, when we're in a bit of an overtrained state, what is normally going on is that there's a release of cortisol that just isn't coming down. So just to explain that, cortisol is a stress hormone, but there is a natural release of cortisol when you're exercising. Cortisol generally just naturally goes up, but as you finish exercising, that cortisol level should come down. If you're in a bit of an overtrained state, or your body is in a bit of a state of stress, that cortisol level just keeps going up and going up. And so you will then struggle to either lose weight because your body is in a state of stress, so it's biologically holding on to everything that it needs to because it kind of feels like it's going to war, or equally you won't be able to gain weight in that situation because overall your body is in a bit of a state of stress. Not being able to lose weight or not being able to gain weight is definitely a red flag for overtraining, and as a result we really need to manage our nutrition along with that as well. Some things that you need to take into account is that if you're not matching your energy input to your energy output, and you're constantly finding yourself mismatched where that output is so much more, you might find eventually that you're getting into a state of what we call low energy availability. Along that whole spectrum, essentially it means that you might start with a little bit of fatigue and just getting a bit tired, but on the other end of that spectrum there's really bad physiological damage that can take place, all the way from stress fractures to physiological systems just not working properly. And so the other end of that spectrum is what we call RED-S, or REDS, Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport. We've done a whole webinar on this, which you can find in the next video over here, but we really just want to emphasize that this is something that you have to start taking into account, and it's very applicable to both males and females.
Thanks for that, Shona. So hopefully we're building you a really complete picture, and now we're going to dive a little bit into the physiology. What can you do to monitor what is going on and to try and prevent some of these things from happening before they become a problem in your life? Probably the easiest way of doing this is using heart rate. Now we've got two ways we can measure heart rate, and one, you don't need a wearable device. You can simply use two fingers, place them on the inside of your wrist and track your resting heart rate. Obviously, if you have a wearable device that tracks heart rate, you can use that, and it is much easier. And the idea here is to track your resting heart rate upon waking every morning. So you'll get up, go and empty your bladder, come back, lie down, really get yourself calm for 5 minutes, and then take your resting heart rate. There isn't a perfect number. We are all very unique in this regard. And the idea is to find out what your resting heart rate is. That may go down slightly over time as you improve in fitness, but it's going to stabilize at some point, and that number will be unique to you as an individual. The idea is that we are trying to keep that within roughly 4 beats of your resting on an ongoing basis. When it goes over 4 beats, that's a little warning sign. Perhaps you want to slip a high intensity run, maybe you want to run a long run at an easier pace, but generally speaking, small adjustments should bring you back in line, and I would only look to make an adjustment if you had 2 days in a row where you had higher readings. If it goes to 8, 10 and higher beats, we need an immediate response. Probably some recovery time, as in full rest, is required, because that is either a sign that you are going into or catching an illness, or it's a sign that you've literally jumped way too far over the mark from a session that you did and you need some extra recovery. With modern day wearables, particularly the top of the range watches, you can now also track heart rate variability, which is even more sensitive than resting heart rate. So if you have that capability, then I urge you to make use of that function on the watch. Literally, the watch will tell you every morning when you wake up what your heart rate variability is during sleeping hours. And quite the opposite of resting heart rate, what we're looking for with heart rate variability is a higher range. In other words, a big difference. And so to understand why I'm saying that is because heart rate variability is the interplay between the parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous systems. The higher that variability is, the more they oscillate around the mean, the healthier you are, or the healthier state you are in. When we have a low heart rate variability, that indicates dominance of one of those systems over the other, and that happens when we are in a very stressed situation. And because of how the body works, they wrestle each other for control essentially. And so the bigger that swing is, the lower the heart rate variability, the more under duress you are, the more likely you are to need some recovery or some rest. Again, I typically like to work on 48-hour cycles. So if heart rate variability is out for 2 days in a row, we need to do something about that. So remember, for heart rate variability, we're looking for high numbers. For resting heart rate, we're looking for close to your normal mean, in other words, a lower number.
All right, so we've gone through all of these different red flags, and as you've learned now, essentially overtraining is filled across an entire spectrum. All right, and so just be really cognizant that if you're picking up on any of these red flags within your own training, take action, because you don't want those to become too severe and you land up on the absolute end of the spectrum, which is full overtraining syndrome, which takes months to get back from. All right, so if you got any value from this video, hit the like button, and yeah, we'd love to hear your comments, and if you have any questions, put them in the comments tab below.